Today we're going over the idea of Father's Day that's impacting the whole country in America. However, one important component that very few people even talk about, or almost no one talks about, is the fathers that fought a 200-year war to create independence for our people who were under bondage. This is a critical discussion, really important, that surpasses anything that they tell you about the establishment of this country, how they fought a civil war to help themselves, or all the wars that have happened ever since. There's never been a time in the history of our people in this country that even comes close to the fact that our people, a selective number of our people who believe in having their own independent country, fought a war that lasted 200 years, all led by men. This is who we celebrate today. These men who were great. I want to go over a few of them to give us perspective as to where should we be today after all that they did, fight 200 years to create independence for our people. What should have been the outcome of all those activities? Clearly, there should be an enormous amount of descendants today voicing about their own ancestors by name because of their actions that allow us to live in the state that we are, because of their hard efforts, putting their lives in the line so that we can experience a life of freedom without servitude. Let's start with Denmark Vesey, as we call it today, but his actual name was Telemaque. He is known for his movement of 1822 in South Carolina. What he did was he developed a plan to form a nation, a country for his people. Before he even started that plan, he was an average African-American enslaved. He became very fortunate. He became available to have much money. He became quite wealthy. And because of that, he purchased his own freedom. And after that, he went to the slave owner that owned his wife and his 3 children. And unfortunately, they refused to sell his family to him. This created an emergence of hatred of him towards these people, and that's what started the process for him to start forming in this country, because he could not trust these people, who they are and how they treated his family. So he started by starting a church, a Christian church, which of course the people who were white and controlled the nation, they burned his church down. Not that he was a Christian, but he used that as a way to form a country. After they burned his church down, he opened up a second house of worship, a Muslim temple, again as a vehicle to get our people to become part of this new nation. The second time around, the same slave owners destroyed his temple, and he finally went to a third avenue, and that was going to the African mysticism and get their people connected as an organization to form an independent nation. It didn't succeed. Most of his leaders were vanquished, and of course he himself and other of the leaders were of course lynched. This is what we have to remember about this, the outcome of his efforts, because it is by learning of the efforts of your fathers that you're able to increase or pursue greater things. And in fact, when it came to Telemaque, the first thing they did was lynch him. After they lynched him, they took his body, dragged him across the area in chains, just like the pictures we have here that took place in 1999 for James Byrd Jr. in Jasper, Texas, where he was dragged around in these chains by his head. After they did that, the next step, they took Telemaque's body and they cut it up in 4 parts. After that, they buried his body. After they buried his body, and we don't know if it had a coffin or not, after he got buried, they decided to remove the tombstone of his burial because they wanted no one to know where his body was. And after that, the actual city decided to change his address of where he was living at and put it to a different town so people could not find his building where he used to live at. On top of that, they made sure that anyone with the last name Vesey that was black would be immediately lynched. So his descendants opted to not use his last name, basically losing the history and the heritage that could have happened because all these acts against them. This is critical. If a movement is to pursue and continue to move forward, you have to have that component in place. And that was lacking. And to this day, those who are descendants today of Denmark Vesey, who use the last name Vesey, see him as an abolitionist, like Martin Luther King, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, not a warrior who was ready to form their own country, because now they control the narrative, and this is what they teach his children. The same thing happened with the outcome of Nat Turner. Even though he was a father, and upon giving birth to his son, his wife encouraged him to fight this war. She wanted her son not to live in bondage. But the outcome turned quite similar to Telemaque, and there are others. For example, Cato, the great Cato, the liberator of our people. The same thing happened to him because of what he had accomplished was so great. The children today who are descendants of Cato don't see him for what he was because they themselves have been taught otherwise. And this is important. If we want a movement to actually succeed and proceed from one generation onto the next, we must be responsible. We, the originators, the fathers, must bring that into our children. Yes, we have responsibility as fathers, as raising our children, as taking care of our children, providing for our children, make sure your household is taken care of. But as a liberator, you also have a great responsibility that your children must learn and accept that we are fighting for our independence. And it's of no value to provide a home, employment, anything that we see in the society and say this is how we help our family, and your family continues to suffer with all the atrocity this country creates upon our families and believe that this is all we have to do. No, the most important thing, you must liberate your family. You must bring security to the life of your children. And the only way you can do it is in your own country. This will never happen. It has never happened in this nation. So when you walk away from that, you create outcomes like what's happening with the children of Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, who we call Telemaque. And also, most recently, when you look at the Republic of New Africa, when one who was actually a member of the Republic of New Africa ran for office for mayor and was asked in an interview on a white television station, do you want to make Mississippi into a black nation? He told them no. And what was the outcome? His son followed him, became elected as mayor, and to this day, in Jackson, Mississippi, though they call themselves nationalists, they're not. They act as a nationalist, but their behavior is completely American. There is no effort to form a country in Jackson, Mississippi, which used to be the headquarters of the Republic of New Africa. And you could not believe that these people who call themselves nationalists have nothing to do with forming a country for our people. And this is important for us to understand. We must take the responsibility of following up after what Nat Turner did, what Telemaque did, what Gabriel Prosser did, and the hundreds and thousands of our people that lost their lives in that 200-year war so we can have our own country. We have to be responsible for that today. We must take responsibility for that today. Teach your sons, teach your daughters that this is important. Their actions are important, are required of them to pursue independence if we are to be free as a people and have our own country. Everything else means nothing, because the life that we live here is almost a complete nightmare. We must form our own country. Unless we put the effort into it, it will never happen. On this day of Father's Day, I salute every member of our people that does not forget that we must honor the fathers who did the hard work and we followed through today, and pass it on to every generation before us. It is mandatory to have a nation. You must fight to gain your independence.